All right, welcome back. Today I'm going to finish section 9.1, what is a plant, but I'm really going to focus in on plant adaptations. What are some certain features of plants that they have that help them overcome some obstacles trying to live on land? Now, plants started in the water, okay? I always like to envision some kind of green algae just like on the surface of a body of water, like a lake or a pond, and then I hear Space Odyssey theme music in the background. Dun, 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 dun. And all of a sudden, this algae just flops onto land. Boom, 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 boom. Obviously, that's not how it happened, but that's what I like to picture in my head when I discuss land plants. So land plants, evolved from green algae. Green algae is found in water. In water, if green algae is found in water, it didn't have to worry about getting enough water because it was in water. Not only that, the water supported its body weight. Never had to worry about drying out. The form of reproduction for green plants, everything's in the water, so like flagellated sperm and egg mixing in water currents, okay? But we know that land plants evolved from green algae based on similar chemicals that we have found between the two, as well as similar DNA sequencing. And, these early plants lived in moist areas due to advantages, okay? Plenty of sunlight, because it's like, on the edge of land, and carbon dioxide in the air instead of, being dissolved in the water, being submerged. But they still had to be tied to water, hence the word moist areas. So we're going to talk about some key characteristics that plants evolved in order to live on land. Now, this is kind of like the nice little story of how plants make their way to today's plants. It talks about that maybe a protozoan, which is a protist, and some cyanobacterias, maybe, whatever, maybe that's where plants came from. But we get algae, all right? And we get to green plants and the green algae living in the water. And then we get land plants, and the first land plants were probably mosses, liverworts, and hornworts, and we'll discuss those in the next section. But then they developed vascular tissue, ways to move water and sugar more efficiently throughout the plants. And then we'll talk about the evolution of the seed, because not all plants have seeds. Some are produced by spores. All right. So first adaptation that plants had to overcome in order to live on land was protection. Okay, protection from water loss, protection from insects, okay, predators, if you will. So this protection was made up of a waxy substance called a cuticle, a very protective layer found on the stems, leaves, and flowers of plants. And its main purpose was to slow evaporation and to protect it from insects, because who likes to eat crayons or wax, right? So here's a cross section of this waxy cuticle at the top and on the bottom of a leaf. Notice that we still have tiny little openings to allow for water vapor to escape, as well as oxygen and carbon dioxide to enter. Okay, another adaptation was support. So aquatic plants are supported by surrounding water. Well, when you're on land, you don't have that water to support you. So now we see an adaptation of the cell wall, and how the cell wall is rigid and provides structure and support, and it's made of cellulose, a compound that doesn't break down very easily. And cellulose is actually made up of chains of glucose molecules, but these glucose molecules are arranged in a way that a lot of enzymes can't recognize it to break it down. We also see another adaptation in other species of plants called lignin. Lignin strengthens cellulose and it makes it more rigid. Wood is lignin. Okay, so support, cellulose, cell walls. So here's a picture of a leaf, and if we zoom in, we can see that it's made up of plant cells that have cell walls. And we zoom in on that cell wall, and you can see these cellulose microfibrils crisscrossing each other. And if we just pull out one of those microfibrils, we'll see that it's made up of strands of cellulose molecules. And these cellulose molecules are made up of chains of glucose. This is a glucose molecule, this is a glucose molecule, this is a glucose molecule. And how those glucose molecules are arranged is that one is upright and the other one's upside down. And this one's upright and it's upside down. And it's upright and it's upside down. We have enzymes that can break glucose, but they all have to be in one direction because plants orientated upright and then upside down, upright and then upside down. Our enzymes can't recognize that, so we can't break down cellulose. Okay, third, adaptation in plants that allowed them to thrive on land was transporting materials a little bit more efficiently. So early plants, the only way they could move materials was through diffusion and osmosis. And if you don't remember what those two terms were, diffusion was movement of high to low. Okay, movement of high concentrations to low concentrations. Osmosis dealt with the movement of water, the movement of high water concentrations to low water concentrations. So they didn't require any energy, but obviously this is not going to be very efficient because it's just slow. Well, when you're on land and you're dealing with the weather, the elements, you have to be able to move things fast. So grasses and trees have something called vascular tissue. And a vascular tissue is just a network of tubes found throughout the entire plant, from the leaf to the stems to the roots, that helps transport water and nutrients. Okay, so you can see here this phloem and this xylem. So vascular, never mind, I thought I was going to talk about vascular tissue here more in depth. But one of these moves water and the other one moves sugar. So xylem moves water and phloem moves sugar. Maybe I talk about that later on. Reproduction. Aquatic plants have water that help them carry their reproductive cells, but when you're on land, you're not surrounded by water. Okay, so they had to evolve ways or other strategies to have their reproductive cells meet and fuse and fertilize, right? So we have wind, wind from pollen. Pollen is basically the male sperm blown onto the female reproductive part of a flower. We still have some species that are tied to water, but animals, okay, like bees. This bee's covered in pollen, lands on another flower, pollinates it, fertilization occurs. This is from a pine. This is a male pine cone. You shake it, that's pollen just flying right off. Okay, so just a recap of adaptations, how it needed to reproduce, the use of other strategies, right? Wind, water, animals. Transporting materials using vascular tissues. Support, aka cell wall made of cellulose. Throw in some lignin. And finally, protection, cuticle. Okay, slowing water loss. So that does it for 9.1. So your homework assignment is the plant bee questions.